Hello and welcome to another video with me, Joe from J.H.Leather. In this video I'll be showing you how to make an axe sheath. So for this video you will need the axe you want to make the sheath for, a piece of paper for pattern making, a set of poppers for the closure and some 2 to 2.5mm bridle shoulder leather. So first of all we're going to draw around the head of our axe on our bit of paper and just mark in line with the handle. So once you've done that, we're going to mark a shape on the top which would be our flap for closing the sheath with. So I'm just doing mine quickly, just sort of like this from the end where your sort of case will end to, joining up with that front edge. And then with a ruler you can just join the two marks where the axe handle is together, and then you want to add 1/4 inch to the front edge of your pattern and also 1/4 inch to the bottom edge of your pattern. Basically, when we put this together, we're going to put in a 1/4 inch filler to stop the axe head from cutting our stitches we do, and so that's why we've got to add 1/4 inch there. So once you've done that, we are now going to cut our pattern out. So you have the back side or the back pattern here, and as you can see the top just folds over and sits nicely on the face of the axe there. So watching that, we're going to mark out for the front of our pattern, so just put your original pattern underneath and just trace around that bottom side of it up until where the sort of top line is there, and then just straighten the edges with your ruler. And you can now cut this out as well. Okay, so once you've done that, you can just put your two pattern pieces together and just check them on your axe, and then just mark the front of each one. Now, I forgot here, but I did remember eventually you got to turn your original pattern over, else if you cut it around that way, it will be inside out, if that makes sense. So once you've done that, you want to cut a 1/4 inch strip off of your bridle shoulder. And you can then put your patterns onto your bridle shoulder and cut these out. Okay, so once you've drawn your patterns onto your piece of leather, you can now cut these out. Okay, so you should have your two pieces cut out a little like this, and what we're going to do now is just edge them. So when you're edging, you want to make sure where the two pieces are stitched together you don't edge there, but you can edge everywhere else. And so once you've got these bits cut out, we can now take them all over for staining. And once you've stained all your pieces, you can then crease them as well. Okay, so next we're going to mark out for stitch marking. So we're just going to stitch mark this front edge and the bottom edge as well. So set your dividers to your stitch marking width and draw them along these two sides. And then using your number 7 stitch marker, stitch marks along these marks also. Okay, so we're going to mark next for our filler bit to go in. So if you just put the front part of your case onto the back and just mark that top edge with your scratch awl, and then you want to set your dividers to 1/4 of an inch and mark along the front side and along the bottom as well. And then once you've done that, you are going to measure out and cut your first filler piece for the front. Now you can stain the two cut edges here now before you glue them on. I've chosen to do mine afterwards. If you do, like me, choose to do yours afterwards, you just have to be careful with your glue if you're using contact adhesive, because if you get the contact adhesive on a unstained area, it sort of seals the end and you won't be able to stain it properly afterwards. So you want to just glue that on. If the end overhangs the bottom a little bit, that's perfectly fine, because we can cut that off once the two halves have been stitched together. And then once that's stitched on, you want to do the same for the bottom side. So once you've got your two bits stuck on, depending on how thick your axe is, you may need to add an extra filler to the back of your sheath. So if you just sort of lay your axe in, and here you go. So you can see my axe gets wider the closer towards the handle it goes. Now I do manage to get this bit off camera, but basically what I'm showing you here is the gap between the back edge and that filler that we've placed in. So what you want to do, if you do have that issue with yours as well, you want to just cut another bit of filler and glue that on also. So to do that, you just want to mark how long you need it and then skive the end of one end down to nothing. Mark how long you need it, cut this and then glue it on top. So if you have a particularly wide axe, you can use a wider or a thicker piece of leather here if you need to, or you can stack more than just the one filler on top of your original strip, if that makes sense, just so you get the edges nice and flush. So you can see here that extra bit of filler has just added the thickness to the back end of my sheath there. And once you've done that, we're now going to make attach our poppers. So the easiest way to do this is to actually get your case even, and just put the front popper on first. So you want this close to the end in that sort of rounded section. Just mark on where you want that to go, and then using your rotary hole punch, you can mark, sort of see which one the neck of the top of the popper fits into best, and just punch this all the way through your leather, and you can now fit this half of our popper closure. And so once you've got the top half fitted, you can then just slide your axe into place and hold the front over the top, and then bend that flap down and mark on by pressing hard on the popper where the second half of this popper needs to go, and then you can just punch that through with your hole punch, and again now you can now fit this second half of the popper. So now we are ready to glue our two halves together, but first what we're going to do is with our sort of knife here, just going to scruff up the edges of our fillet. Basically, if you're gluing sort of grain to something, if you scratch it up and rough the surface a bit, it lets the glue stick better, if that makes sense. It does to me, but yeah, so you're just scruffing the edges up and it will just help the glue to stick to the flesh side of the front part of our axe case a bit easier. So you want to make sure your front is nice and level with the rest of your case. And then once it's stitched on, once it's glued on even, you can put some tacks in if you want to. I'm quite happy here with just having mine glued together. So we're now going to stitch our axe case. So with this, we're going to double hand stitch our case, and we're going to start as always with one back stitch, and then we're going to stitch the rest of the case double hand stitch as normal. Okay, so when you get to the end of your stitching, you just want to do another 1.5 back stitches, and then you can cut your threads off. Okay, so your axe sheath should look a little bit like this one. With a bone, you can just get in there and just open up the edges a little bit. And you may need to do a bit of trimming. I have to on my one, just there's a bit of overhanging edges there. So with your knife, you just want to cut any sort of edges that are sort of not flush, and you can just nick those corners also if you haven't already. So I'm just roughing the edges up on my ones, just so that when I restain it, the stain will go on and be nice and shiny. So you can try it on your axe now here. as you can see, I probably should have added another filler in on that back edge, just where it wraps around, but it does fit fine on this axe head, and I'm quite happy with that. So we're now going to do our finishing touches. We're going to restain and polish the whole of our case, and we are then going to recrease it also. Okay, so here is our finished axe sheath. Hopefully yours looks a little like this one as well. So you can use techniques shown in this video for making knife sheaths as well. This is the same technique that I use when I am making those sort of things, where you draw around the blade and add a little bit extra for that filler to go on. So anyway, hope you enjoyed the video. If you liked the video, please click the thumbs up button and subscribe for more videos and tutorials. If you have any comments, please leave a message down below and I'll get back to you as soon as I can. Thank you for watching.